Okay. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with,
Probably am.
uh, yeah, you probably are, the whole idea of the best way to elevate people out of poverty and the world out of poverty being dropping energy prices, right? That's something that Dr. Peterson talks about. And I think there's some truth to that, but I want to discuss a couple other
Yeah,
issues
let's discuss
I
that.
see. So,
I wonder what they're talking about or what they
yeah.
what they mean by that. All right, dropping the energy prices.
So good to see you, brother. Glad to have you back on the Hype Mind and be collaborating here. Yeah, I mean, I see the logic behind that, but I see that as being a only a piece of the pie. Um, Granted, it is a very easy piece of the pie to solve, to be honest, and it is a huge piece of the pie,
Mhm.
right? The idea of reducing energy costs, allowing people to be able to afford gas, afford electricity, afford heating oil, afford, you know, air conditioning because that's electricity too, right? So essentially, if you reduce the cost of, um, energy, whether it's electricity or oil or gasoline, yeah, it does give people a lot more freedom
No,
to,
I think what he's getting at here is that if you reduce the cost of energy, you reduce the cost of almost everything because
right? Yes,
almost everything is being transported or has something to do with electricity, and so that's why.
right.
But no,
Manufacturing, yeah.
but I think where you're getting at too is that doesn't really solve the poverty problem. Um,
Well, I think it does to an extent. It does allow people to be able to afford things that they feel they can't afford, but it doesn't solve the piece of the pie that says, okay, now that I have money, right? Because I'm saving money on the fact that goods are cheaper because it doesn't cost as much to produce them. My heating and electricity is cheaper, so my housing is cheaper. Building is constructing things, everything's cheaper because if you reduce the cost of energy, like you're saying, everything becomes cheaper, right? You still end up with a situation of, okay, now I have money and I waste it. Why? Because I'm an American consumer who doesn't know how to use money. And so when I get money, I squander it.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I found that to be very common talking to
and, yeah,
peers, and yeah, is that and I never, fortunately, I was never used to that. Um, and yeah, got an interesting story behind that, I guess. But but yeah, I see that too
what?
because I always think no, just like the I don't want to waste, but like the not just waste is that like even if you gave somebody like
Like a
increase their
discount.
salary by half, right? They'll still have money issues. And
Right.
in a way, if it's like, I mean, they say you're always gonna have money issues. It's just
Right.
big money problems versus small money problems. But um, it just seems like that's like what happens is their threshold changes. Or is that the right word to use?
No, I see what you're saying. Yes,
Yeah.
I would say
It's
threshold
like if
work.
someone has it, if they see it's there, they know it's there, they just spend it automatically. They don't really like think about, okay, this is here.
Right. Because
This is extra. I'm gonna save it. It's like this is
they've
extra. I'm gonna
learned to
use it.
live as someone who spends this amount of money.
Hmm.
Well, and I want to be clear. Well, so I want to hear your story, to be honest. I think that's interesting, and I'm curious what it is. But I want to be clear. I do believe that the reduction of energy costs completely uh, helps people come out of poverty. It gives them the opportunity to choose to come out of poverty, right? An opportunity they might otherwise not have as easily or struggle with, right? I do believe you can come out of poverty with energy costs being at whatever they are, but I think those chances are made much easier for people on a much larger scale if you reduce the cost of energy. But I think there's two other pieces of the puzzle that I want to talk about. And the first is, your money problems and the way you spend money. And the second is just living with respect and integrity to begin with. So it's a moral issue. But I want to hear your story about this. Does it have to do with the threshold?
It just, well, I guess more focused on is actually your education, what you've learned,
Yes.
how to
Yeah.
handle money. And and I can tell you, I didn't have like any formal education of you know, on finances and stuff like that. But for me, it was like it was a little bit different. I think I was automatically frugal because just spending because my parents were that way.
Right.
And when I was when I was getting up there, like the end of high school, I remember I had a job, right? And my sister, who's a twin, my twin, she had access to our bank account, and my parents wouldn't give me access to my own bank account. So I would hand my parents check, my check to them. Um, and I always thought that was strange. Everybody else had access to their own bank accounts besides me. I kind of, looking back, I was kind of felt like the singled out a little bit, but I think that also
They
like
were reserving you for greatness. You didn't even know it.
yeah, they were. It's true. But and then once I did have access to my bank account, I think it was more of a like to me, I think that just made me a little bit more cautious of how I like spend my money. Because I was never used to spending. Like even at that
Right.
age, it was
So
like,
you didn't have that freedom.
yeah, and just seeing my parents very frugal made me uh just be like that or get used to that. So, and it's just I've run into a lot of people who, and you have too, who just never ever have savings ever. They they
And
live
that is a really
paycheck by paycheck,
great way to look at this issue,
and I
right?
was
Even
never like
most
that would actually
people
be
have freedom.
hard. Like at first, that would be hard for me to do, um, since I just wasn't like I didn't even have freedom when I was young to spend money. So
That's one of my favorite examples. Home to save money. And I say, well, how much money have you saved? And people say, well, none. And I say, why? Because they spent it on vacation. And I say, so when you have the opportunity to save money, whether it's by living with your parents, by, reduced energy costs, by, free groceries, you take that money you've saved and you spend it elsewhere because you're so accustomed to spending it, right? It's something I do too. I have to be very careful that when I get extra money, I say, okay, I saved money here, but that's not an excuse to spend it. But so I do agree that energy is one situation, and that like you're talking about, that that education of what do I know about money and what practices have I like learned that I don't know I've learned. That is the first one. That's the first part I want to, you know, we've already emphasized is what do you do with your money when you have it? Because even if I uh, if even if I give you, free groceries and energy for a year, I'll bet you won't save money by the end of the year, you know. But the other thing I want to emphasize, and I was awoken to this on a much more conscious level this morning. I went for a walk. I'm walking around the area I live in. This section of town I live in is the majority of the population is Hispanic, right? Probably 75% of the people living in these neighborhoods around me are Hispanic. So I'm basically only walking through Hispanic neighborhoods. And that's not to say this doesn't happen in other neighborhoods. It does. But I think of all the Hispanic people who always flaunt their Hispanic pride, right? They'll take any moment to celebrate. And Americans are white people are the same way. They'll take any moment opportunity to celebrate, their holidays or whatever, right? Just like Hispanics will. But when I walk through their neighborhoods, I'm not seeing a reflection of that pride. I'm seeing garbage everywhere, right? So much so to the point where I'm like, this neighborhood looks like it's in poverty. These houses look like they're in poverty. And even if I saved you money on energy, I don't think you'd step out of poverty. And that's because I do blame your morals about that. You don't have respect. You don't have, I mean, I just remember growing up, and I've taken this into my own life. I remember growing up, and my dad's yard was clean, right? Because if garbage blew onto our yard, which sometimes it does, we'd clean it up. If if the wind knocked over our garbage can and spilled it all over the road, we'd clean it up. Um, and I grew up in a lower middle income family, still middle class, but on the lower end of it, I would say. But I'm looking at these yards and I'm going, this place looks like poverty. And there's just no pride for where you live, even though you might argue, we're Hispanic, we have pride, or we're whatever race, or we're whatever culture. And I don't think it's just a cultural thing. I do think it's a yeah, I think it's a socioeconomical thing. But I'm like, there's no pride. Like, it doesn't matter if someone gives you the opportunity to step out of poverty. You're practicing poverty in your own morality. Like, I could move you into a first class neighborhood and you still wouldn't give a crap about what your lawn looked like. Um, so, I mean, part of that does have to do with the environment you're surrounded in. But there are so many people that between not being able to afford it, not having good education money wise, and just not having good like ethics will always live in poverty. And walking around these neighborhoods, right? Because it's a huge section of town that looks like this. Huge, just looks like a dump. You could make a field day of cleaning up this section of town. And it's, lower middle class families, but their neighborhoods are so poorly taken care of by themselves, by the people living there, that they look like they're in poverty.
Several things come to mind.
Yeah.
One is you, something can look really bad when it's dirty. Like you can have a nice house, you can have a nice car, but if it's dirty, it will look. I remember one time when you were selling one of your cars, I think I suggested that you cleaned it. Was that the truck you sold? Because it made a big difference.
Probably.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it made a
Absolutely.
big difference. Right? It didn't really add any value. Like you didn't put any
Of
valuable
course not.
material in it, but it just looked more valuable and people pay more. Like yeah.
$25 at the car wash makes a $300 difference or more.
Right, which is pretty crazy, right? But that also made me think about how like if you're not grateful for what you have, why is somebody going to give you more? If
More.
you can't take care of
Right.
what you have already. Yeah. Um, but did you say anything about leadership or
Yes.
you said yeah.
Yes. And here's where
Again,
that ties into the ethics. But I say I believe most of these neighborhoods are lower middle class. I don't think they're in poverty. I think they're lower middle class, which is a good place
no,
to
I
be.
yeah, I disagree. I mean,
But the way I see them living, with the fact that they don't take care of their front properties, their own houses, their own yards, makes me look at that and go, you might as well be in poverty. You're asking for it. You're living like you live in a dump. It's disgusting. I wouldn't walk across your lawn in bare feet.
hmm and that just caused I think that might cause a lot of expenses in the way of like if you don't take care of stuff you have, it's like ooh, if you don't take care of your car, like you're gonna have to pay a bigger bill if you don't properly maintain your car. Like you can mess up your car, you might have to buy a new one. But yeah, I can see there's a lot of like you wouldn't consider them poverty. I wouldn't consider them poverty either. There's a lot of like there's still tons of even though you might say and a lot of people might say we don't have a great economy or as good as economy as it could be. And you know, I think you're able. I at least know that you're able to make something out of it at least.
Oh
And
yeah, sure.
people are complaining about money problems, especially people that I've worked with that I've said I make the same amount as you. I know some scenarios I actually make less, and I just handle it differently. Like I just take care of it differently. I'm very conscious about what I'm spending it on, but I have another story to tell, which I shared with you, which this was a long time ago, but someone hit me up on Instagram, and I was kind of like, why does this guy have an Instagram? So it's basically like one of those scenarios where it's like, I don't know, African family or something like that. It's just d doesn't have enough for food, and dude, I don't know how they have enough for a phone. I don't know, but
But
he's
they do.
asking for money, right?
Right.
So I had a full-on conversation with them. Because I'm like, I'm not giving you money. I obviously didn't trust this dude. I don't know where he's from. Um, you
But I'll
know,
give you time.
but Oh yeah, no, no, no. I was like, dude, what I was thinking in my head is like, I'm gonna give you something way better
Right.
than money. Like, I want to help you even more to where you don't have to ever go to anybody else. Instead, you can, you know,
Rely on
yeah,
yourself.
instead you can rely on yourself. And I suggested some things to him. I remember suggesting, you know, you must ask a lot of people, right, for donations. And I said, what if you approach them with a service? Like, what if you could do something? Like you already have the internet. There's a lot of things to do in the internet. I remember suggesting that and just realizing if I was in a situation, I mean, there's a lot of things that like went through my head that I would like try to do. I had a full-on conversation with him and he's just persistent, just asking for money, never like thinking outside the the box. I mean, I remember I talked to him about everything. I was like, dude, can you sell your phone? Like, how much is your phone worth? If you really need food that bad, you'd sell your phone, right? And but I mean,
Right.
it's like if this was as brutal as it sounded, because he was like and I could see why people fall for the trap, or maybe maybe it isn't. I don't know if I it's necessary to call it a trap, but like obviously, a person in that situation, you can't not feel bad for, right? So, I did want to help him, but
I would say you can.
what? Say again? I can't.
You can not feel bad for them. I, the more I see someone's willingness not to help themselves, the more I say very easily, all right, so be it. Like if you don't care,
Well, I'm not saying you can't
I
let
don't.
go. Like I definitely
Right.
wasn't attached. Of course not. Because I knew he didn't have, after talking to him for a long time, I knew he didn't have the willingness to like
To
to
actually change.
act, yeah, to
Right.
really try hard, to really take, you know, things seriously and just I didn't see there was this desperation without the hunger, which might not make sense, but like instead of instead of really trying hard, he was just trying to do the bare minimum, if that makes sense.
Well, here was one of my thoughts. I was walking through the neighborhood thinking about that, and I said, what if all these neighborhoods that are still low key middle class, but clearly there's a money issue in people's minds. Um, what if you gave them the lower energy? I do think that would help, right? But there is still a very big percentage of people in those neighborhoods who would remain stuck in other bad ways, like spending the free money they have, staying obese, right? If you're obese, it's really hard to bend over and pick up garbage on your lawn, you know? So even though you might now have the financial resources to eat better, right? Which maybe you believed you didn't before, maybe you didn't. Um, a lot of these people aren't going to change their lives like that. And so it doesn't matter if you're freed from the chains. You still sit in your house overindulging in food and as an example and staying obese and staying inactive physically and you know your neighborhood, your house doesn't actually improve even though you've been given a huge blessing and a huge opportunity to really invest in your life. That was one of my first thoughts. And I said, if I placed a bet, I don't think any of the people in this percentage who are overweight would take advantage of something like that. They would just say, well, I have more money to spend. What can I spend it on?
right.
But I do think it comes down to a handling the moral aspect of it. The I want to respect my property. I want other people. I want to have integrity and pick up my neighborhood. I want to have pride in my neighborhood and in my own yard, in the place I live in. I want to have pride for myself. I want to take care of my own body. I want to take care of my family and make sure they eat healthy and live healthy. I think that comes down to a new approach of putting more power in people's hands and encouraging them to use it in that direction. And a glimpse of what that looks like is is the essentially the cities giving the power back to the people and saying, if you don't pick this up, we're not going to pick this up. Like you have to you have to want to be proud to live in this city. Like, and if you don't, then go somewhere else. Like you have to want to be, we're all on this together. Like whether it's your house, whether it's your street, whether it's your city, whether it's your neighborhood of town, section of town, it comes back to creating a sense of pride in that community, no matter how small or big it is, whether it's the whole city or on a scale of only your own family living in a three family house. Doesn't matter. It comes back to um, being given the opportunity to be leaders, all of us leaders in our own communities, right? I think a lot of people have this belief that, there can only be one leader or there can only be 10 leaders in a group of 30. It's like, no, everybody can kind of be a leader in their own life.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I mean, it's like, I think people realize how much they can do on their own to change their financial situation.
Their financial situation and just in general, their whole life. Like I think a lot of times what happens in order to make sure society functions on a high level is we end up with a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is beneficial to an extent, but the hierarchy ends up taking a lot of responsibility from people. It shoulders the burden when other people don't. But the downside to that is people happily offer up their burden. And if they're not shouldering any burden, they're not really, well, there's nothing to take pride in. They're not going to take pride in someone else's work. You're not going to be like celebrating the fact that someone else cleaned up your own lawn. You won't feel proud of that. You might feel proud of living in a clean house, but if someone else did it, then you don't have the opportunity to like own the fact that your house is cleaned because of you.
Right, right, right. Yeah, are people cleaning up their lawns for them?
Well, in most cases, no, but I walk down the street and I see the biggest example is garbage, right? It's people put everything in their garbage bins and expect the garbage truck to take it. And a lot of times the garbage truck can't take what's not in the bin and it can't take certain things just because you threw it in a bin. And so it gets left on the street corner. And hopefully, eventually, the city comes by and picks it up. But if they don't, you just end up with streets covered in furniture, covered in, old pillows and tires and this and that. And you're like, the garbage man can't take this. Like, it's your responsibility to keep your neighborhood clean by taking it to the dump. I don't know how you make that happen, but you have to want to take pride in your neighborhood.
Hmm. Yeah, I wonder if they get fined instead. Do they get
Well,
fined
and
for
a
that for
lot of
littering?
times you do get fined. The garbage company will fine you for stuff like that. The town will fine you for stuff like that. But that doesn't instill a sense of pride in you. That really just beats you down more because you're like, well, now I have to spend money on something else. Right. So it's either I go to the dump and invest my time and money in a dump trip, or the town fines me. Right. And so in both situations, you're kind of uh, you're being punished. Right. So it really comes down to you taking a sense of pride and knowing that you have the freedom to keep your neighborhood clean by choosing to go to the dump. And you don't have to wait to be punished by the government, for fining you for not keeping your neighborhood clean. But I think a lot of that really starts with taking action, like just stepping into it and saying, you know what, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna think it's gonna change my way of thinking. I'm gonna hope it's gonna change the way I see things and think about things.
Yeah, that'd help.
But like to some degree, you know, raising the world out of poverty falls on you as an individual. It's like there's only so much the government can do. There's only so much, reducing the cost of energy is going to do. There's only so much, understanding how money works is going to do. If you don't take pride in yourself and in your community, you're going to live in poverty your whole life.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll just go back to what you said about the energy costs. Like you said, it's like, yeah, ultimately that would help. It's a piece of the puzzle, but um, just taking ownership yourself. I mean, it just makes sense, dude. That's it. It does. It makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, even if nobody offers you the opportunity to step into that role as like a, and I don't think people like the word leader, but that role as a leader in your own life, it's like you can assume
You don't think people
responsibility
like that word?
automatically. No,
People
I don't
don't.
think they do because it
Interesting.
automatically denotes effort and it automatically denotes um, punishment if you fail in your action. It denotes a lot of um, responsibility denotes what would you call it? It means if you make a mistake, you're accountable for it. And people don't want to be held accountable for their mistakes. And so if you're afraid of that, you're not going to want to be a leader. But the downside is if you're not a leader in your life, then you're not a leader in any area of your life, which includes the place you live in, the family around you, the community as a whole. And it rubs off on everything. Your street looks like trash. Your checking account looks like trash. If you don't assume responsibility for yourself and your life in every area, someone else will have to manage it, and you won't feel as good about that. And so it's either you allow someone to run your life for you, or you assume the responsibility, and as a result, you know, the the punishment for your mistakes um, of owning your life. But there's no alternative to discomfort. You're gonna experience it.
Yeah.
It's it it comes down to though encouraging people to be okay with embracing that discomfort, with embracing those fears, with choosing, we would rather have the community established in people living like leaders and living with self accountability than, you know, living as victims who've given all their control up to someone else and are hoping, you know, are either believing that nobody will fix their problems or are waiting for someone to fix their problems. Clearly it's not a comfortable choice to live that way. It's not horrible if you can numb it enough, but you don't, why, then you're really not living.
Yeah. I don't know how many people like don't know or don't like think like that, you know, that they don't have the control or they don't want to take pride in the things they own and their home. But yeah, what do you think
Well,
about
I would say
education?
walk down the street and look at it. I don't think it's necessarily people we know personally. I
Yeah.
think it's when you walk through neighborhoods and cities and towns, you look around and see the way people treat what they have been given, and they take it for granted. And, obviously I do the same. I take things for granted, right? But the more you look around it, you say, why is this um, a prevalent environment in my community? Why is this such a big problem? And how do I encourage people to want to take pride in their life, even if energy costs are sky high?
Yeah, so how do you do that?
I believe that is more easily done coming together as a community, getting to know your neighbors little by little, because the more you speak what's on your mind and the more you get to know the people in your neighborhood, the more the more things are pointed out. The more you talk to your neighbor, the more you realize that uh, you guys don't like the fact that your street isn't cleaner. You don't like the fact that your kids waiting for the bus doesn't, they don't feel safe doing that. Um, You don't like the fact that your neighbor's dog craps on the sidewalk every evening, stuff like that. And the more you get to know your neighborhood, the more you come together as a community, the more you share your thoughts out loud, the more you're able to confidently come together and address problems. And then you're able, so like if you can't do it on your own, then don't do it on your own.
Hmm.
And so I do think it starts with something as simple as, greeting the people around you and building that sense of community, because a lot of people near me, and I would say probably the same for a lot of people in the suburbia of Boston area. They live in neighborhoods and they live in homes with multiple families, or they live in homes that are densely, packed together next to other people's houses. And the more you talk to each other, the more you walk between each other's house, the more you're going to say, we should talk to our town about fixing this sidewalk. It looks like crap. We should talk, we should really get together and spend some time picking up our garbage when it blows over. Um, we should encourage our neighbor to take his car to the shop and not fix it in his driveway if he's gonna, spill oil all over the street and stuff like that. Maybe we should help our neighbor out. Maybe they're struggling more than us. And as a result of doing something as simple as getting to know your neighbors, you start to really bring the problems into light and ask each other how you can address them and have different ideas of how to address them and discover that you do want to take pride in your neighborhood and your community and and that you have more power than you thought you had and more control and opt in to actually taking control where you can take control and you decide that you don't have to put your neighborhood pride on a back burner.
That's how you don't like trash. I don't
I
either.
don't. I don't, dude. I
No.
pick it up off my own lawn. It blows in all the time. And I sweep the leaves off the steps. I pick the garbage up in the lawn and I put it in the garbage can. I
Yeah, same here.
Trash is just a
Same
great
here.
example, but
Hmm.
it's like I want to live somewhere clean. I this is my piece of land and I take pride in that, even if someone else's garbage blows onto it. Even if someone else chooses to throw their garbage on it, I'm picking it up because I live here. And nobody's gonna come here, even if I'm broke as hell, and say, damn, what a shithole you live in. No, they're gonna show up, they're gonna say, damn, dude, you're broke, but your freaking yard looks like $1 million. But that's a direct projection of myself. Like I take pride in myself. I eat pretty well. I take care of my health. I, I keep my room clean so that I am living in a clean environment. And so the thing to notice is if everything outside of you in layers is progressively not well taken care of, you can continually come back into yourself and say, I'm probably not taking care of myself. And the more you do that, the more you actually expand that out of you.
Hmm. Yeah, I think sometimes it's standards that people feel like they need to follow, or it's people just care. Like people just care about the space they live in, the other people
Right.
around them,
But
themselves, their own
that
life.
is a direct link to the fact that caring of that is a direct link to reveal their own degree of caring about themselves. Like if you care about those things, that's actually a sign that to some degree you care about yourself.
Yeah.